Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and this time we got another book review, and in this particular instance we have a particular book that is maybe hit or miss for a lot of people, but it holds some personal significance, at least for me personally, because this particular book is what kind of got me on my reading journey, so to speak. Just to give y'all a bit of backstory, I obviously, going through the public school system, I had a lot of mandatory reading, and we had certain reading programs that was issued by the state for a lot of kids to participate in. And ever since I was able to stop reading, I basically did for a number of years, but then I eventually started kind of getting back into it and started reading for fun. And this book is what kind of got me started. Now, to be honest, I was at a whole different place, a long time ago for what my beliefs and morals were at the time, I guess you can say. And I've come a long way, but I have an interesting author here that I want to talk about. But first of all, the novel is called Blink, and the author is Ted Dekker. Now, there may be some people who know who Ted Dekker is. He's written quite a number of books, but he does basically, the genre that he basically fits into is maybe some people may find kind of odd, but it essentially is a combination of, he has his like thriller series, but then he has like his psychological horror series, but it all is under the envelope of like a Christian suspense, thriller, horror type of genre, because it very much is Christian, for definitely to the fullest degree. And again, that harkens back to what I was saying, where at the time that I read this, I was a very different place in my life, obviously, and since then I haven't really picked up much Ted Dekker. Also, to get started, just right off the bat, I gotta say, Blink is nowhere near Ted Dekker's best work, by far, of any means. His best work, by a lot of fans, some would consider his Circle trilogy to be some of the best that he's ever written, and for a while his most popular book was called 3, which was a single release, and you can probably get, the title alone probably tells you some significance alone to what the plot of that book is. But Blink was the first book I picked up, and it was by him. And ever since then, I kind of read him for a while. But it's basically within the last few years, I kind of stopped reading him for a number of reasons. But basically, all I can say about this book is, like I said, it's not his best work. But I felt like I would go ahead and review it and kind of give my opinion on it, since it was kind of the first book that kind of set me along my reading journey. But basically, the plot surrounds this main character named Seth. And he has basically a genius level intellect. He has like a very high IQ, very sharp, very witty, almost to the point where he's slightly not empathetic at all. Sometimes some people can be so smart that they lacked empathy. And Seth, to a degree, falls within that label for sure. Basically, the plot basically stems around him sort of gaining empathy, but in a lot of ways, it's a reflection of someone, the main character in this case, gaining faith, so to speak. So again, because this is a Christian-based book, but the plot revolves around, basically, he has such a high-level genius intellect that he's actually able to predict the future. Now, I know that's going to sound kind of crazy at first, but this is a huge critique of the book that I have to add, because it is totally based in realism. It takes place in a modern setting, in our world, with modern politics going on and all that stuff. But the gimmick of the book is that he can read the future. And that involves him eventually getting tangled up with this Arabian princess. And I'm not kidding when I say that, but he gets tangled up with this Arabian princess named Miriam. And she's basically trying to escape her royal life of captivity, where she's, it's all the kind of things you can imagine, where she's like going to be married off into a marriage that she didn't really want. It's a forced marriage type, an arranged marriage type of that nature. And she's basically trying to get away from it. And during the chaos, she ends up stumbling into Seth, and then both of them are on a run, so to speak. And like a hitman gets involved and starts chasing them down, and it gets kind of crazy and almost, one would say, almost nonsensical at some point, because I think what a lot of people thought about this book is a lot of people think it's an awesome book, and there's gonna be a lot of people who are gonna believe that because of the genre itself. If I have to be completely honest, there's so many people who read nothing but Christian literature, and that's just what they do, and they're gonna think this book is amazing, and that's fine and all. But the biggest critique of this book, unfortunately, is that it's basically something that it gives a lot of credence to bibliophiles, and it's very critical of, unfortunately, the Muslim religion. So if you have kind of a tender spot for that, you may have to be careful reading this book, because if I have to say one thing about Ted Dekker when he's trying to write about other religions, is that he unfortunately gets a lot of stuff wrong. He really does get a lot of stuff wrong, and there would be stuff in here that, especially if you are a Muslim yourself, you would be reading it and you probably would get very offended. And that's unfortunately kind of the reality of this book. It's something that unfortunately has not aged well, but it was released, I have to say, I think it was released not long after 9/11, and that's kind of what essentially, I think that's what gave him a lot of credence to write something like this, or gave him some inspiration to write this book in 2002, I believe. So yeah, very shortly after 9/11. So you can imagine what people's mindsets and viewpoints were about the Muslim religion around that time, and there was a lot of things that people were ignorant about and didn't understand, and that's unfortunately going to be a major criticism of this book. But if you are a Ted Dekker fan and you just happen to have not read it, it is fairly decent, I would say. Again, not his best work, but fairly decent to say the least. And I think if people are on the verge of trying to if they're wanting to get more into thrillers and stuff like that, and they want it to keep a strong Christian aspect to it, then I would say it's a nice book to pick up. But it's so Christian to such a degree that there's no curse words, there's no like deep level taboo stuff that ever gets mentioned. There is violence, of course, and there's action, but no curse words that I can think of. In fact, in none of Ted Dekker's books have I seen curse words. So that just gives you a hint of what you can expect in this book. And because of the fact that Ted Dekker will stray away from stuff like that, that means that unfortunately some of the dialogue may not always make sense, because the characters may be in some situation that would totally make sense for them to curse or say certain things, but of course they won't, because we're talking about a specific genre. And that's kind of my biggest problem that I have with a lot of these type of books and genres, that the dialogue gets very limited because the author themselves feels like they can't always write what they want to write down because they have to appeal to a certain audience. So that's unfortunately kind of my critique that I have to give about this book. So not bad, especially if you are into this sort of thing. And there's something I have to stress. I do think Ted Dekker is a good writer, but I think he got a little bit overly ambitious with this one, if I have to be completely honest, considering what the atmosphere and mood of the nation was shortly after 9/11, where it kind of felt like he kind of jumped on that boat because it was something that most people were talking about. It was on the tip of everyone's tongue at the time. So I guess to him it felt like it was an easy thing to try and write about. But in 2018, all these years later, there's a lot of stuff that's a little bit problematic with this book. But otherwise, yeah, that's honestly all I can say about it, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in, and hopefully I'll have another review for y'all up soon.